For many people, their car is their pride and joy. They invest money into buying it, and then they invest even more money into making sure it's always taxed, insured, maintained, and full of fuel. If that sounds like you, you would probably never dream of parking your car up one day and then walking away to leave it abandoned. Some people don't share the same philosophy, though. They're happy to abandon their cars, even when their cars are rare, expensive, and valuable. Check out these stunning abandoned specimens in this video. The most common places to find abandoned cars are old barns, places where a car might have been stored for safekeeping many years ago and then forgotten about. This first car is a barn find, but it's a barn find with a difference, and may have been forgotten about for years. But at some point in the past, someone loved it so much that they performed extensive customization work on it. It's a 1941 Packard 90 that's been turned into an open-top tour bus. The original vehicle has been extended to a length of more than 20 feet, and with that extra space comes extra seating. You can now fit 12 people inside this old Packard, and additional doors have been fitted to help those extra passengers get in and out. As the engine is a 356 Flathead 8 featuring a 3-speed manual, it might not go very fast, but power is more important than speed when you're dealing with a vehicle of this size. Cleverly, the original open-top design has been extended along with the rest of the car, so the canvas cover now rolls back along the whole length of the body. It'll need a new paint job and probably some new wheels too, but it'd be a fantastic collector's item for somebody. Our next car didn't come from a barn, but a garage. It looks great now, but it was in a very sorry state when it was discovered. This beauty is a 1969 Mercury Cyclone spoiler. That's already a rare muscle car, but this 390 4-speed version is one of only 8 that were ever built by Cale Yarborough. Most people will never even have seen this make and model of car before, and yet this rare treasure was allowed to rot away inside a garage in Florida, USA for decades. When Texan John McElroy bought it as a restoration project, he didn't have high hopes. Many of the parts were missing, and with the car being so rare, it was difficult to find replacements. Through sheer determination and persistence, he managed to get the job done. After years of hiding in the dark inside a garage that was never opened, the car is being driven to car shows all over the United States of America, where it never fails to turn heads. Even highly knowledgeable motorheads have difficulty identifying it when it rolls onto the parking lot. The average price of a Mercedes-Maybach S600 is approximately $200,000 US. Depending on customization options and extra features, that figure could even exceed $250,000. That makes it a huge investment, and therefore not the sort of thing that you would leave lying around in a public car park for more than a year. Someone has, though. Here's a very dusty and seemingly forgotten Mercedes-Maybach S600 in Hanoi, Vietnam. The thick layer of dust is evidence that it hasn't moved for a long time. But look closer. The car doesn't have any license plates, nor does it have any tax stamps. It's possible that the owner has never driven this car at all after making their purchase. Why would anyone spend so much on a car and then leave it languishing like this if they don't want it? There are thousands of people who would love to take it off their hands at a reduced price. What makes it even crazier is that the cars are more expensive to buy in Vietnam than they are in the USA. When it was brand new in January 2015, this car would have sold for just under 10 billion Vietnamese dollars. That's nearly $600,000 when you convert it back into US currency. If you know a thing or two about vintage cars, you'll probably have heard the name Norman Thames before. He's best known as an Indy 500 designer, but during the 1940s and 1950s, he also designed and built classic cars, like the 1948 Buick Special Streamliner. This particular version of the car, known as the Norman Thames Special, took 3 years to create from start to finish and included a hand-formed aluminum body built by Emile Diet and a 1948 Buick V8 engine. At some point in the 1950s, it was sold to an American Air Force officer painted white, and then abandoned in California, standing out in the open and exposed to the sun. That ought to have been a criminal offense. The car festered for 50 years until collector Gary Cerveni heard about its existence in 2002 and rescued it. It took him several years to restore it, but now it's as beautiful as it ever was before. Even though it had stood in the sun for so many years, Gary was able to retain 90% of the car's original body while completing the restoration project. That's no mean feat. Bonham's is one of the most respected auction houses in the world. There's almost nothing their experts haven't seen, and their motor department is especially knowledgeable. It says a lot about this next car that when Bonham's expert Gregory Teutons was sent to assess it, he had no idea what he was looking at. It took him a while, but he eventually realized he'd come across a totally unique Michelati-bodied Jaguar XK140S coupe. There are only 3 Michelati XK140s on the planet, but this is the only one with a C-type engine, and the only one to feature this style of bodywork. It turned up as part of the contents of an old garage in Belgium that had been donated to an animal rescue center to be sold for charity. Either the people who made the donation were incredibly generous, or they had no idea of the value of the asset inside the garage. The car started life as a standard XK140SE coupe in May 1955 and was shipped to France, but suffered a bad crash 2 years later and needed new bodywork. The vehicle was sent to Michelati, and after that, it was briefly owned by the famous French actress Brigitte Bardot. It needs a lot of repair work now, but it's not beyond salvage. The market for classic and vintage cars is enormous, and if you have the right car, there's almost no limit on how much value it can accumulate over time. The first time this 1936 Bentley 4.5-liter Vanden Plas Tourer was sold from one owner to another in 1952, it went for less than $400. The next time it was sold, in March 2019, it went for just under $600,000. Part of that price is due to its rarity, though. This is the last car of its kind still in existence, and finding it wasn't easy. The car belonged to a British war veteran who loved it dearly, but by the late 1980s, it was no longer in drivable condition, and he was forced to lock it away in his garage in Stockport, England. That's where it stayed for 30 years until he passed away at the ripe old age of 96 in late 2018, and his relatives discovered it while clearing his home. The once stunning interior has almost completely rotted away, but the damage is mostly cosmetic. There's nothing here that an expert couldn't fix, and all the other features are original. The auction house that handled the sale was expecting it to go for around $300,000 at the very most, so the final price came as a shock to everybody. We're back to barn finds in the United States of America now, and you'd need a good eye to spot the value of this Corvette among the clutter piled below, on top, and all around it. There's no hiding that distinctive design, though, and this isn't any old Corvette. It's a former drag racer. The car was a mystery when it was first discovered. It has the appearance of a 1970 Corvette convertible, but contains model parts from several different years. The paint code was 984, suggesting the car should be yellow, but it was red. Most puzzling of all, the odometer read 00024. It was only when the car's new owner posted pictures on a dedicated Corvette forum that answers began to arrive. Thanks to a combination of the white stars painted on the roof and the distinctive set of 427 cylinder heads in the photographs, the car was identified as an NHRA drag racer that was once known as the General. The odometer was low because it had never been driven in anything other than drag races. What an amazing discovery. When a car collector called Art Winter passed away in New Jersey, USA in 2018, he left his whole collection to be auctioned. As you might expect from a collector, he had a few valuable vehicles in his lockup, but by far and away the most impressive was this 1968 Shelby GT500 KR. It was apparently the pride of his collection, but he'd stopped driving it in the early 1980s after it was rear-ended by a careless driver and suffered damage to the rear panel. Even then, it apparently came out of the barn occasionally. The most recent inspection sticker on the window when it was discovered came from 1995. Amazingly, the original tires were still attached to the vehicle, but sadly, they could no longer hold air and had to be replaced. Aside from that, though, it didn't require any additional maintenance, and it started up at the first time of asking. Aside from the black spray paint on the rear tail panel, which hides the marks from the impact, every other detail on the car is original. It's now in the hands of a new owner based in Iowa, and we hope it's out on the road again regularly. The Rover Group, a British car manufacturer that was popular in the United Kingdom and Europe, sadly no longer exists. The quality of the cars that it produced declined during its final few years of operation, but we still have a few of their classics to remember them by. This example might not be looking its best right now, but it was a beautiful custom car when it was brand new. This is a custom-built aluminum Rover Disco Volante, built on the chassis of a Rover 10 and made to order for a British serviceman by the name of Flight Lieutenant Crowley. We don't know how it came to be in such a badly decayed condition, but we do know that it attracted a lot of attention when it was exhibited at the Earl's Court Car Show in London in 1952. It deviates from the typical design on its class by way of the inclusion of a special radiator and a horizontal SU, which replaced the original downdrop model. A sports coil and a straight-through exhaust pipe were also added to comply with the flight lieutenant's preferences. Those are the only mechanical alterations ever to have been made to the car, and presumably, with some love and attention paid to the bodywork and wheels, it would still be viable for road duty. A thick coating of dust doesn't always pose a problem to a classic car. Sometimes, if the dust is thick enough and it's never disturbed, it can even preserve the original paintwork. That was the case for a pair of Ford Mustang Shelbys that turned up in Tampa, Florida in 2019. Their 87-year-old owner was too old to drive them and wanted to sell them so he could donate the proceeds to charity. When he called in experts for evaluation, he told them neither of the cars had been moved for at least 17 years. They're quite a pair. One is a jet black GT500, the other is a lime and gold GT500 KR from 1968. Their original provenance is unknown, but their current owner bought them in 1980. They're in such good condition that even the original air conditioning still works. And after the dust and grime were washed off, the bodywork was still in pristine condition. Even the interiors are clean and protected from decay. They're like a pair of vehicle time capsules. Barn finds almost never look this good. Finding just one old Bugatti in a barn would be a story worth telling, but finding three at once is incredible. It's almost too good to be true, and yet it happened in Belgium in late 2018. A well-preserved Citroën from the 1920s was found alongside them, but with the three Bugattis to talk about, nobody cared about the Citroën. The pick of the bunch is a 1937 Bugatti Type 57 Cabriolet, bodied personally by Graeber. The other two are a standard Type 40, although we hesitate to refer to any Bugatti as standard, and a Type 49 limousine. All three of them went to auction in February 2019 without any work being done to them. And even in their slightly broken down state, they sold for a combined price of over $1.5 million. The cars were owned by a sculptor who bought them for art more than recreation, and so none of them had moved from the barn that housed them since the late 1950s. Because the Type 57 has barely moved since it was bought, it still retains all of its original features, instruments, and dashboard, along with the horns, headlights, and bumpers that Graeber fitted with his own hands. When we mention the name Bizzarini, most of you will probably think of the Lamborghini V12. That's a fair association to make. But Bizzarini also designed and built a very small number of Stratas. And here's a Bizzarini 5300 Strata that hasn't seen the light of day for many, many years. Only 133 of these cars were ever built, and this particular model has been parked up and gathering dust since the 1980s. One of the bonuses of its long time in storage is that it has fewer than 10,000 miles on the clock and therefore very little wear and tear on the 327 V8 Corvette engine. The interior could do with a little work, and we're at a loss to explain why there's black tape wrapped around the spokes of the steering wheel, but when you look at the beauty of the car as a whole, these are trivial matters. Even though this incredible sports car deserved a better fate than being locked away in a garage for 40 years, we should be thankful that the conditions it was kept in have protected it from the worst effects of time. It's only a few tweaks and a little bit of maintenance work away from being driven on the roads once more. We hate to think about how much it might cost to acquire, though. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.